All right, everyone. Next week, we'll finally start getting the results of the Alvin Bragg hush money case. The jury will convene, and we're not exactly sure how long deliberation will necessarily go. It could be days, actually, before we get a verdict in that case. I'm leaning towards the likelihood of a hung jury. I think there's about a 50-50 chance that they can't actually come to a conclusion on most, if not all, charges, which are all tied together anyway. The individual counts are part of one supposed underpinned crime. So it's going to be difficult to say, okay, well, he's guilty of this one fraudulent payment cover-up thing, but he's not guilty of the rest of them. Some of it comes down to jury instructions with regards to what is actually told to the jury. Now, the judge in the case clearly does not like Trump. He's a DNC donating liberal. He quite clearly played a lopsided game with the defense and the prosecution in terms of what was going to be allowed, who could be called as witnesses, what could be discussed. It was very favorable to the TDS sufferers there. But the TDS sufferers don't seem to be very happy or enthused about the situation. And I think I know why. When your star witness admits to stealing money from the organization live in front of the entire world, and one of your other main witnesses, technically the central figure of the case, which is Stormy Daniels, uses her time up on stage to talk about how she can discuss things with dead people, that doesn't look like a slam dunk case. Months ago, the liberals were all gung-ho for this. They said, the second the indictment happened, they're like, damn, we finally got him. Orange man bad. We're finally taking him down. He's going to be a big orange man, big orange meanie, poopy pants, is going to go to prison for the rest of his life. That's that. Finally, we've gotten over the Trump era. But then the trial happened, and they saw what the witnesses actually said, and they looked at the actual evidence, what Merchan would allow to actually get through it all, which wasn't much for the defense, by the way. There were several people they wanted to call up as witnesses, and they were summarily disallowed from doing so. But even then, they're looking at the testimony. I don't think that they're very confident that he gets found guilty on anything. I'd say hung jury is most likely. That is, that there will be at least one person there who, in favor of or against a guilty verdict, refuses to budge. Like, I would think it would be obvious. If I was on the jury, I would look at this and say, I don't even understand what crime is being alleged here, because the payments would only be illegal at all if they were pertinent to a secondary crime, and then and only then as well if it was deliberately used to influence the election. But that didn't happen. So there is no actual crime, because him fucking Stormy Daniels, if that even happened, and then paying her wads of cash in and of itself isn't illegal at all. And there's been not one bit of testimony proves that Trump was even aware that this was going on. In fact, it's partially countermanded by the conversation with Cohen that was actually played, the audio recording, where Trump's like, what are you talking about? I've got to pay Stormy Daniels. Can't I just, grab a wad of cash here? No, says Cohen. Let me handle it. Yeah, and you were defrauding the Trump organization at exactly the same time that this was happening. So obviously you had everyone's back and knew perfectly well what was going on. Costello's testimony kind of damaging for that as well. That was the star witness. So I think that the TDS sufferers, their original bravado really began to die down because the case seemed like an open and shut slam dunk against Donald Trump, and now it's pretty iffy. I would say there's a greater chance he's found not guilty than guilty, and also a good chance that there's a hung jury. A hung jury might or might not mean retrial. That part I can't predict. Let's say that the jury is incapable of finding an actual verdict, and they go before the court and they say, look, there's no reconciliation here. We've got one juror or two jurors that say guilty and the rest of us say not guilty, or vice versa. But nobody's willing to change their mind. So we've all looked at the evidence. We can't make any conclusion here. Alvin Bragg then has a problem, because if the jury is hung, especially with a favorable judge, and that's what they have, and with a favorable jury composition, if they are incapable of delivering a guilty verdict in one incarnation of the jury, it will be difficult to retry because you would expect probably the same outcome. If that happens several times in a row, as it very well could, somebody could stand on political principle and say, yeah, I think Trump's guilty, but this is going to wreck the republic. I'm out. I refuse to find guilt. There's a possibility that one of the people on the jury will have that mentality. I, by the way, am perfectly amenable to the concept. Okay, you think Trump's guilty. Is it really necessary to open the can of worms of finding a former president guilty and then having to, in the judicial sense, you have to grapple with how to actually punish him without upending the republic entirely? It's not even worth it. Fuck the TDS. It's literally not worth it. My jury instructions would be, this is the first time in our nation's history that something like this has happened. These are white-collar crimes, if they even were committed. You have the opportunity to lay this to rest so that we can play things out politically. You think that Orange Man bad, then vote against him. But this is horseshit, and it's going to upend the judicial system entirely if we establish that precedent. Hey, by the way, jurors, it'll get thrown out on appeal anyway, because quite clearly you're not going to be able to pull the same trick twice. So why find him guilty? I wouldn't even have to support Donald Trump to understand why this case is a bad idea. I don't support prosecuting Joe Biden when he leaves office for the same reason. To tell you what you'll end up with is a death spiral where every administration tries to retroactively punish the last one. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Every president has done seedy shit in the White House for all the way back since the 17 goddamn hundreds. Normally we say, okay, if they did halfway decent job as chief executive and didn't pop off World War III, then we'll show some largesse for the purposes of our republic holding together. This case, I don't think is going to result in a guilty verdict. I know a lot of you actually disagree with me. You're like, well, they're going to try to throw the book at him. Okay, you still have to convince the jury. And the fact that the jury is going to be mainly liberals might not mean anything in the end. You only need one juror to refuse to convict. And it's going to be real hard to find him guilty on one charge and then not guilty on the others. Like give him a symbolic punishment. Juries can do this. This is why charges get stacked sometimes. The prosecution will stack a shit ton of charges in front of them, predisposing them to believe, well, he must be guilty of something. This isn't a single charge, it's like 11 counts. Well, he's got to have done something wrong. We'll find him guilty, that they'll find guilt on a lesser included, they'll find guilt on one out of the charges or something like that. This does happen. But because they're all pertinent to the same supposed secondary crime, what legal rationale could you possibly use to say, okay, he's guilty of one fraudulent payment, but he's not guilty of the rest? It's sort of an all or nothing approach. It would very much surprise me if they were to do that in this case. Well, if they can't do that, then the next best thing would be hang the jury. I would think that's probably the most likely. As for whether Alvin Bragg is nuts enough to retry if that happens, that's anyone's guess. Can't give a prediction. He obviously wants to nail Trump. He's doing this for political and self-serving reasons, not for proper ethical ones, because Trump is self-evidently not guilty. But he might retry. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. I can't give you that answer. I'm definitely going to be live reacting when the final verdict comes in. Regardless of whether Trump is found guilty or not, regardless of what happens, it's going to be exciting. It will create a legal precedent for the rest of our country's history, and people are vastly underestimating how impactful this case could be, regardless of what the outcome is. Regardless of the outcome, it's also going to bring upheaval to the political system. We're just not sure exactly what direction it's going to go in. That's about all. Peace out.